I'm sex repulsed and in a relationship with an allo. How do I move past my fears? This time on Ace Dad Advice. Hi everybody, welcome back to Ace Dad Advice. So happy to have you back here on the channel. We're answering another question from a viewer today, and this time it's about being sex repulsed and in a relationship for the very first time with an allosexual person. So let's get right to it. I am a sex repulsed ace currently in her first relationship since accepting herself and coming out, and I'm terrified. My partner is allo, and I find myself hesitant to dip more than a toe into this relationship while he is diving in head first. Am I being self-destructive, preparing myself for the day I'm not enough? He constantly says that it doesn't matter, that I am enough. But I try to be as honest as possible, and I tell him I believe you today, but it's hard for me to believe you for tomorrow. I know communication is super important, so I try to keep that up. But do you have any advice on how to move past my fear? So thank you so much for this very good and very vulnerable question. When I look around at the world of content about asexuality and relationships, one thing that I notice is that a lot of it is geared toward maybe sex neutral aces or sex positive, sex favorable aces in relationships with allos. And it doesn't always look at the challenges that sex repulsed and sex averse ace folks face if they're pursuing relationships with an allosexual person. The needs are different, the challenges are different, and we should absolutely be including more conversations about the specific experiences of sex repulsed and sex averse ace folks in the content and conversations we have. So first, I want to say, I think it's great that you're prioritizing communication. Just from the tone of and from the content of your question, it's clear that you and your partner are talking about this. You allude to the fact that your partner is affirming, saying that you are enough, that they are in this relationship, and you confirm that communication is an important part of your approach in this relationship. That is such a strong foundation. Leaning into that communication, especially communication around these hard conversations, these hard topics about sex and intimacy, lays the perfect foundation for coping with and dealing with these fears that we have, these insecurities that we may feel in our relationships. So first off, thumbs up, good job there. That's a great start. So a first bit of advice I would have is to focus in on these fears. And first for yourself, really articulate what these fears are. I think a lot of times in relationships, we just sort of generally fear things. And maybe by we, I'm saying me. In my relationships with my partners, even as a sex neutral, sex favorable ace person, I still experience fear all the time about not being enough and about our relationship failing because of my sexuality. But what has been important for me in coping with those fears is first really understanding them, spending time thinking about what these fears are at their core, really being able to articulate exactly what it is I am afraid of instead of just generally, feeling fear and anxiety and insecurity. And then taking that information that I have figured out for myself, taking that clear articulation of my fear and presenting it to my partner. Like, here's what I am afraid of when it comes to our relationship. Here's exactly what I fear when it comes to you. Because it's one thing for us to have clear and open communication about the intricacies and rules and contracts of our relationships, but it's a different thing to have open and clear communications about the things we're frightened of. Being that vulnerable, sharing those fears, and having as open a space around them as we do about our negotiations around intimacy, very, very important. Sometimes it can almost be easier to do the intimacy negotiations than it can be to really deal as a couple with what your fears are. And that leads me to the second bit of advice. Make a mental shift for yourself that your fears in a relationship are not something that you have to deal with alone because you're in a relationship with your partner. Your partner is there to help you out, to help you navigate these fears that you may have. Thinking about the challenges that you face, the insecurities that you are harboring, the doubts you may feel, thinking about those less as your problem to solve for your partner and more thinking about them as, hey, this is some, can we solve these things together? That helps make the navigating those fears easier. Relationships are a two or more person job. It's not something that you have the responsibility of making work on your own. So bring your fears to the table and work on them together. Include your partner in the solutions. Include your partner in the navigating. Include your partner in the processing. By doing that together, you're not only removing some obstacles in your relationship, but you're also developing stronger foundations in your relationship. You're building better team skills. You're building these strong experiences where you tackle something together and succeed. It all works toward deepening and building your relationship. The last bit of advice is a bit harder, and to me, it remains the hardest thing that I do as in my relationships, and it's understanding where these fears come from. You know, the fears that we have that we are not going to be enough for an allo partner, even though the allo partner is saying, you are enough, you're enough for me, you're what I want, I'm willing to work on this. All of that stems not from something in us, but something outside of us. Those are messages that we've internalized from the culture that say over and over again that you have to be a sexual person in order to be a full human being. Relationships are only valid if they're sexual and on the relationship ladder up toward marriage. That, we have to have sexual attraction, otherwise we're not a full human. We're bombarded by these messages all the time, and we've been bombarded by these messages ever since we were very, very, very young that tell us that how we live and how we are experiencing the world is wrong somehow. Well, we've internalized those. And so the voice in your head that sounds like you saying, well, I'm not going to be enough, that's not really you. That's the voice of the external world and these social constructs and these dominant forces that are pushing on us all the time, these normative forces that are pushing on us all the time. It's that voice. It's not really you. And it's really helpful to remind yourself as much as you can, the fear that I have, it's not rooted in what's true. It's rooted in some normative idea that's out in the world. This fear is not real. This fear is culture telling me that I'm not enough. It's not me saying I'm not enough. It's the culture that said I'm not enough. Continually reminding yourself that that nagging voice in your head is outside of you and not you is a really helpful tool in overcoming these fears and anxieties. And last thing, look at your partner and what your partner is saying and doing. A thing that I struggle with a lot in my relationships is believing what my partners say and do, even though they are saying the things I want them to say and doing the things I want them to do. I am often caught up because of insecurity into believing that what they are saying and doing is like some masked, mysterious, it's like a ruse they're playing to kind of get something over on me, and they're not really telling me the truth, that this isn't really real. And my brain will make all sorts of crazy gymnastic leaps around the truth instead of just looking at my partner's behaving like supportive, loving partners and saying things that are loving and supportive and just accepting those things as the truth. I think a good thing to do when you are really in the thick of feeling a lot of fear and insecurity is to stop, take a breath, and just look at what your partner is doing right. Your partner is telling you that you are enough. Your partner is communicating with you and working on the relationship. Your partner is showing up at the table to be in this relationship with you. Um, when the negative voices start coming in, combat those voices with the things you can see and hear and experience in your relationship that counter those. You know, when the bad stuff comes, counter it with the good. Have that stuff at the ready so that you can say, well, yeah, my brain's saying that this is a giant failure and it's never going to work, but he's showing up. He's affirming my value. He's listening to me. He's negotiating intimacy in a way that's safe and supportive for me. He's reminding me that I'm good enough. Like, listen to what they're doing. Don't discount those things. Use them as a way to help you. It's another way to include your partner in the managing of your fears and not dealing with them alone. And here's a final word to all the sex repulsed and sex averse ace folks out there watching and participating and engaging with the channel. Being sex averse or being sex repulsed is not an automatic exclusion for you from the world of relationships. You The culture may tell you that. The culture may persistently send messages to you that being sex repulsed and being sex averse means you need to be sad and alone in a cabin somewhere in the woods, separated from society. But that is 100% not true. You can be sex repulsed and sex averse and still pursue the relationships you want. That can look like romantic relationships with allosexual people. That can look like queer platonic relationships. That can look like just really awesome friendships, a large network of them. That can be monogamous relationships. That can be polyamorous relationships. That can be otherwise ethically non-monogamous relationships. Being sex averse and sex repulsed does not exclude you from pursuing the relationships you want. It does take negotiation, and you probably will hit stumbling blocks because people are people, and a lot of them are just terrible sometimes. But at the core, being sex repulsed or sex averse isn't an exclusion from the world of relationships. That world is open to you if you want to pursue it, and you have every right to pursue it, and you have every right to be angry at people who dismiss you or say otherwise. You can build the life you want, and don't let being sex repulsed or sex averse stop you from trying. Thank you so much for supporting the channel and being here. I'm glad that you are here. If you have questions that you would like answered here on the channel, just send me an email at acedadadvice@gmail.com. And if you want to keep up with other things that are happening in Ace Dad Advice land, including the journey of the Ace Dad Advice book to publication sometime early next year, head over to my website and go to the Ace Dad Advice page. There you will find a place where you can sign up for the Ace Dad Advice newsletter. You'll get cool behind the scenes stuff about the Ace Dad Advice book, some other content from the advice blog, and just other general Ace Dad Advice cool stuff. I would love to have you over there and love to see you there. Thanks as always for supporting the Ace Dad Advice channel. I'm glad you're here, and I'll see you in the next video.